Well, there's some interesting things that you all need to know about that's going on. Now, I know many of you have been talking about this, and it's kind of important about how the Blue Hats, that would be the UN Peacekeeping Task Force, may be called into the United States to help keep peace, which is, by the way, a possibility, because I want to remind you that we have systemic racism in the United States, and apparently there's nothing that we can do about it. Apparently, we have cities right now showing the highest crime rate that they've ever before. In other words, proof, even though they've been defunded and demoralized, proof that our particular police force that we have in effect at this particular time is ineffective to protect the people. In the wake of the pandemic, let's think about this. Now, who would have believed that the UN would have the authority to pretty much shut down the world, which is what happened. They declared a pandemic, and the entire world essentially shut down. What if, and again, what if the UN had decided that they want to become the police force? They want to occupy every country. I'm not saying that it's bad or good. I'm saying, what is that possibility? Is it possible? Could it happen? Generally speaking, when they want a change to occur, this would be our government or those that are in power. When they want to see a change occur, it begins with a report, which starts a murmur. People begin to talk about it a bit. And then it becomes a bigger and bigger problem, and more focuses on it. You can't just bring in people and change it. You gotta, shall we say, condition the population to the idea that it may be necessary. You have to justify it first. You know the saying, you have to have a crisis before you can have a solution. And of course, you never want to have one go to waste. This article came out, and this is out of the UN, similar to an article that came out before the pandemic. I want you guys to take a look at this because I think it's more important than you think. UN calls for end of impunity for police violence against black people. You see, you just guys weren't aware of this, that it's worldwide, this problem, just as the pandemic was worldwide. Worldwide events require what? Worldwide. a central organization to put everything back in order. In other words, a worldwide solution. A UN report that analyzed racial justice in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd has called on member states, including the UK, to end the impunity enjoyed by police officers who violate the human rights of black people. All right, let's take a moment to break this down. Again, I want to make this clear. I believe police need to be accountable for their actions. I believe that there's enough evidence on most police officers. Again, I'm not saying all cops. On most problem police officers, that if the unions weren't in the way, that they could get rid of them. But they can't. It's difficult to fire a cop. So essentially, they do have impunity at this particular moment. Now, removing qualified immunity from a cop completely, 100%, I'm going to be honest with you. Again, I don't like it, but in this world, there's bad and good. Removing full qualified immunity, what it's going to do is it's going to hamstring the police. It's going to make it them to where they really cannot do their job for fear of going to prison, for fear of that, or fear of being sued and losing everything possible. It's a tough situation. It really is. And I believe the solution is, again, to have good, proper ability to fire cops and to discipline them in-house. But what they're wanting to do is to remove it completely. Should that happen and chaos develop, well, somebody's going to need to come in to be able to create order, won't they? Somebody. I don't know, maybe Blue Hats, the UN? The UN Human Rights Office analysis of 190 deaths across the world led to the report's damning conclusion that law enforcement officers are rarely held accountable for killing black people. All right, well, let's be honest here. They're rarely held accountable for killing anyone, black, white, Asian, it doesn't matter, mixed. It's the system, okay? This is what needs to be fixed. Due in part, and at least they say due in part, to deficient investigations and an unwillingness to acknowledge the impact of structural racism. We got a new word, guys. Structural racism. Is this worse than systemic? What is the difference between systemic and structural? I'm going to have to investigate this. It's got to be important. Remember, words matter. The 23-page global report and its accompanying 95-page conference room paper. 95 pages in the conference room. They were busy. Features 7 examples of deaths involving police, including the case of Kevin Clark, who died after being restrained by officers in London. You UK people, I can't believe. You're as bad as we are. London in 2018, a jury at Clark's inquest, who had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in 2022, found the police inappropriate use of restraints. That's not uncommon. They do it to everybody. Anybody that pisses them off. And if you get the wrong cop. Other case studies include Luana Barbosa, Dos Rez Santos. That's a long frickin' name. Look, guys, I can't even get one word, one part of a name right. You're going to try to give me 5? We're going to try this. Anjoya Pedro Metos Pinto. This is serious stuff. I got to quit this. In Brazil, George Floyd. And Breonna Taylor in the U.S. Jenner Garcia Palomino in Colombia. And a guy in France. Okay. I just can't do names, man. Now, this is going to kind of make it clear to you. When you task a commission to investigate only one thing, basically they're going to report on only one thing. They're not going to take a look at the totality of the situation, which would be, shall we say, inappropriate deaths of Caucasians, Asians, Indians, Native Americans. Indians is what I meant. Native Americans, people from almost any country. You're going to keep your brief specific towards what it is that, well, they're paying you to do. The UN Human Rights Office was tasked in June 2020 to produce a comprehensive report. Here we go. Systemic racism against black people. I thought it was structural now. The report investigated violations of international human rights law by law enforcement, government responses to anti-racism, peaceful protests, as well as an accountability and address for victims. The report was led by Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and former president of Chile. All right, guys, they kind of go into a little bit more detail, but you've got the gist of what's going on. Essentially, what they're going to be stating is that this is human rights violations. Every country on the planet that's part of the SWIFT system, or part of the IMF, and a part of the World Trade Organization, all run through the UN. You have to sign agreements and treaties. One of them is human rights. In other words, you surrender some of your ability when it comes to human rights violations. In other words, you've almost, and again, there's a lot of legal work that has to be done, but you've essentially agreed to allow the UN to come in and stop any human rights violations as part of being within the global economy. So we'll have to see where this goes. Remember, it starts with generally a report, and then it starts to get blown out of proportion, and then the media gets hysterical about it, and people get hysterical, and then, of course, we have to have a solution. And obviously, these countries, including the United States, can't solve this problem on their own. It's going to require, well, shall we say, an outside source that'll be much more objective within the country that they're in to be able to bring about peace, prosperity. Remember, you'll have nothing and be happy, according to the UN, should they get what they want. Till my next report, guys. Remember, keep an eye out on this. I think something's up on this. We'll have to see.